tell them what's needed, but that's not going to happen. So it's a question of working it out for yourself, and then they'll tell you if it's wrong. George, do you want to give a little?
Yeah. So I think the thing is that, as Richard said there, different people are interpreting what's going to be needed in different ways, because we're not getting clarity from. I mean, there is some more expected. I think probably this week or next week. That's what it's promised. But I think even when we get that, it's not going to be hugely more detailed. Andrew, have you got a view on that?
No, I mean, we're cheating slightly as much as we can by using contractors or consultants that work with other housing associations, and therefore about to learn from one group to another, you know, so some internal swaps and stuff. Some people have said, yeah, they've put things in and been told you should do more, but haven't necessarily been told how to do it. But
yeah. So I think at the moment the regulators also are learning themselves, and I think therefore what I think both landlords and the tier one contractors, it's quite a delicate situation, because what you ask for and gather at the moment, it may well be in 3 months' time, 6 months' time, that you find that you haven't gathered enough. And certainly when we were working with the HSE on the workshops, the Golden Thread Initiative workshops, they were very clear that it was about the accountable people making sure that the building that is delivered or is being managed is safe. And they're not going to determine what that really means. So one of the challenges is trying to anticipate what's required. And certainly I'm seeing, from talking with different landlords, for example, quite a wide range of ways of doing it. Some people are simply producing an electronic folder of the fire risk assessments, the schedules, the door inspections, and things like that. And their view is that should be adequate. And other people are producing 3D models, even digital twins, because that's what they think is needed. And I think
I've been holding one-to-ones with a lot of the housing associations and local authorities, and it's quite extraordinary. I mean, one particular local authority who should not be named, quite literally aren't even close to even being ready to comply with the fire safety for January 23rd. They're just not in they're not in the ballpark, let alone the Building Safety Act. And then you've got others who've got drones up in the air. It's it runs the gamut, really. I think what we're trying to do today is to get an idea of where you guys are. Where do you sit within that path? And how's it going? What's working for you? Or what route have you taken that you wish you hadn't?
So within the group here, Victoria, I don't think I've met you before. Where are you from, please?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, sorry, I had problems taking my mic off then. Yeah, I'm from Withenshaw Community Housing Group. So currently, yeah, I'm the one that's doing it plain and simply until I find out the best way to look at it. So I've got electronic folders, and we did meet the Jan 23 regs, and the folders at the moment is basically a safety case per block with everything in there that we found out about the building and anything that's been done since build. On new builds, we've not got any over the 18 meters that we've been doing. So yeah, I'm the one that's sitting back, really making sure everything's in there simply, and then looking for the right solution.
Have you Have you just been looking at over 18 metres?
Well, over 18 metres, and any that's attached to those over 18
Right.
metres.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've spoken to a lot of people, a number of organisations that, although obviously the Act is currently referring to over 18 metres, are expecting, you know, I think most people are expecting that to come down. So there's a certain amount of preparation going on for that. So,
Yeah.
so you're how do you? So are you well sorted? Do you consider you've?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we're sorted. We've got what's required. We've even got a reporting mechanism by way of Power BI. It's really looking at if there's a nice, easy, simple way that information can all be stored and put together more simply than I'm doing it at the moment, which is pretty much manually.
Right, okay, because obviously an issue is going to be retrieval. The more information you've got, the harder it is to find, isn't it?
Exactly. We are going through something at the minute, single pane of glass, where it's software that we're using to pull information from different areas of the business. Of course, it's still got to be set up in that way.
Yeah.
As with Power BI or any sort of reporting tool as well. So yeah, I'm set up at the moment. Do know where to get that information and the retrieval of it, albeit it's a bit onerous at the moment. So, you know, it's just looking at better ways to do it, really.
Sure, a bit clunky at the moment, but you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I just ask John Gibbs?
Yep.
I'm being selfish here because I know to some extent what Andrew is doing. Yeah, John, what?
Yeah, George, it's not just about you knowing what they're doing. We want the meeting to know what they're doing, don't we?
That's why I'm asking the question. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. John, where are you from? John Gibbs? He's perhaps stepped away from his computer. Okay. How about Simon? Simon Collery.
Hello, I'm from London Borough of Ealing.
Right. That who was that? Sorry, Simon Fullard. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
We've got two Simons on. That's good. Yeah. So London Borough of Ealing. So where are you on the journey, Simon?
Sorry, I've only just joined, so I've missed half of it.
On the preparations for the safety case and the registration and that side of things, what we're really trying to understand is where different people are on the journey to being prepared. So, and what does that preparedness actually mean? Is it a matter of you know, having electronic folders of documents, or are you doing more than that?
We're doing more than that as well. Obviously, dependent on our systems, which allows us to collate the information on the building safety case. We've got externals as well as internals working on it, and we're just utilising people along the way.
Yeah. Cool. And what do you think colleagues or some of our people may be able to help you with it? Is there anything that you're missing from what you're doing at the moment that you think some better information coming from other parties could help with?
It's just policies and procedures, really, just making sure they're updated, fit for purpose.
Cool.
What about the issue Victoria was having in terms of where to actually put all this data once you've got it together?
Yeah,
how are you dealing with that?
That is another issue. It's making sure that our systems are capable of storing it in a central location that everybody's able to access. Right. So we're still trying to develop that at the moment to ensure that it's capable of, one, carrying all this information, and that it's usable by external parties such as the building safety regulator.
Oh, okay.
Is there anybody
I
else?
know
That wants
people are using share space, so it goes from the sublime to the ridiculous, really.
Definitely.
Is there anybody else that let us know?
AD, where are you from? Am I pronouncing that correctly?
That's very correct. Adi is correct. So AD, that's
Adi, sorry.
Yeah, I'm from Hexagon Housing.
Okay, so how are you doing? Where are you on this journey?
We have external consultants working with us on this, making sure we've got our house in order. Doing a lot on golden thread, make sure we can get the golden thread in place and lined up for the safety incoming. So we are complying on we have development on site. We have to make sure they're complying and ready to be registered. But luckily, currently we don't have any 18 meters building in development or in the pipeline. We do have completed schemes that are 18 meters. So, but we just want to make sure we got a house in order and the procedures are up to date. When it comes to effect, yeah.
Okay, that's cool. So what about the issue that so far is raising, which is in terms of actually retrieving the data once you actually gather it all? How are you dealing with that?
Well, we're working on that. We're working with external consultants. First of all, we need to make sure the framework is working correctly and we have the right set of data that we can call on. And the other thing we're trying to do is to look beyond this, because history tells us that it's just a matter of time. This is going to creep. So we need to make sure we are ready and we have a system in place that's flexible enough to accommodate that.
Cool. Okay. Anybody else want to contribute?
Laura, actually, I'd be interested to hear how Laura's getting on, because I know where you were at the beginning.
Yeah, so we actually have a digital twin of all of our over 18-meter buildings, which we're then using for our data gathering tool. So all of the information is stored within that digital twin model. So that maintains our golden thread of information. And then to build our building safety case, we're actually using a piece of software called ACE with the contractor Adelaide. So what that basically does is that looks at your HAS ID, your bow tie analysis, but also your building safety cases built up into your claims, arguments, evidence. And what that software then does is exports that into a Word document, which would be your building safety report. So, so our digital twin is completed of all of our over 18-meter buildings now. We're putting all of our golden thread information in there. Our IT department are developing a link in to our other corporate systems. So, for example, our maintenance records would be linked into the digital twin. So it's a one-stop for all the information and it'll maintain it up to date. And then our ACE software will link back to the digital twin that we've got as well, so that we can hopefully keep it all up to date. So then when you export the report, it's the current live version of where everything's at. So we're building that at the moment. It's all very digital, and it's using those pieces of software to do that. Which means that it is a bit easier to maintain the information up to date and to pull all that information from the golden thread down.
So you've nailed it in terms of actually being able to find the stuff once you've gathered it all.
Yeah, so we've gathered the information. We've done a lot of surveys. Recently, we've got all the information in regards to our buildings' external walls. We're currently undergoing structural surveys as well, because we have got 10 LPS blocks. So we're undergoing the structural surveys of those. And all of that information is then maintained within the software, which is our digital twin.
Excellent, excellent. So and so you're ready. Is this all actually in operation, or is it?
Well, it's in operation. We're still perfecting our building safety cases, because they're very in depth. We've got the HAS ID exercise to run, which will really tell our safety story for our buildings. Working with the consultants at Adelaide that we are working with, you know, it's not an easy feat to complete one of those. So we're still working on the building safety case, but we are planning to be up and ready for when we need to be. So we are on track with where we want to get to. But obviously the building safety cases, you know, we're following the advice from this consultant who worked with the early adopters Clarion. So that's why we've chose to work with them. But obviously the building safety case, you know, even just the template, it prints off as a ridiculous document at the moment. So, you know, we are working really hard to make sure we've got all the right evidence in place and make sure we've got all the correct information within there.
Yeah.
Can I just ask a question of Laura?
Yeah.
If for some reason you were to get ready in time and you needed to manually print off your safety case, can you do that from your digital twin?
Yeah, so even without even now, you see it just prints it off. So basically it just works on a digital software. You connect all of the elements together in the order that you want it to print out in the report, and then it just automatically prints it. So say if we hadn't quite got all the information into one of our claims, we can print it and you can have a note there saying, you know, where we're currently at and what information we're waiting on. The other good thing about the software we're using as well, it creates an action plan within it. So while you're looking at it, if you were to say look at your external walls and you thought, right, well, we need a little bit more evidence to support this argument here, you can actually create an action to that, which you then assign to someone else and give it a deadline. So you can really rate where you're at with that building safety case as well. So, you know, if people are writing up the building safety case, they can assign actions to whichever subject matter expert needs to find that evidence to provide it for them. So that's a really good feature that we are utilising very much so to make sure that we know where we're at with everything and that we're getting the right actions and the right evidence within there.
That sounds good. I think that's what put me off doing the digital twin at the beginning. When I spoke to somebody about it, it was, well, when everything's in there and we've got that right, print off your safety case report. I was worried about not being ready in time, so I've manually done my safety case reports now so they can all be registered. But then that sounds like you could already do that anyway. It would just be a little bit more of a more manual exercise, but it sounds like you're there, doesn't it? Anyway, that's good.
I think the interesting is what I think you've done what will be needed, and that is that you're not looking at the safety case report as being an end in itself. Because the fact is, and I've spoken to Adelaide, and I agree with you that their methodology seems very sound. The point is, the safety case report that you might submit to the regulator, the following day, something may happen that causes that safety case report, which is just a snapshot in time, to be ineffective. And therefore, the safety case report that people think that, you know, if I've done that, you know, I'm over the line. You've got to have a safety management system in place that allows you to pick that up. You know, pick up. Let's say, for example, some work is done, because the safety case report, at least in theory, has only got to be produced every 5 years. Yeah. Now, if you do some remedial works, for example, in 6 months' time, 6 months after the safety case report's done, there's a requirement, therefore, for you constantly to have your the ability to produce an updated version, which is really what you're saying, Victoria. So I think that's
it's a live document, isn't it? It can never be signed off. It's a full live document that you've got to continually update. You update the safety case at the back of it, and then when the report needs to be submitted, that's an updated report. So yeah, that's where I was going with it. Obviously, Laura is there in that will be automatically updated. Where at the moment, I'm manual updating it, and my safety management system is basically a procedure for the whole organisation. So yeah, it'd be good to have that digital, and that's sort of where I'm looking to go.
Yeah.
What's anybody else using?
I think Camden has taken an interest in operants. Although I started off working at Camden, they have kind of gone off in a direction of trying to find something off the shelf, whereas I was, yeah. So I don't know if any of you have heard of operants, but
yeah. Well, funnily enough, actually, one of the senior guys at Operants is heads up one of our work streams. So yeah, no, working groups. So yes, very much so.
Right. Well, I don't I haven't really continued to work with operants. I was focusing on the structure and content of the building safety case, and I distinguished between the building safety case on the one hand, which is a live log, and the building safety case report, which is the snapshot on that live log.
Yeah.
So I mean, I you know, I also think that there does need to be some kind of system to run this, but I'm not convinced that something like operants can produce something that will.
Where are you, Simon?
Well, I was at the London Borough of Camden, but
yeah,
they have they weren't really interested in going down the route of producing something that was closer to being kind of open source.
More bespoke system.
I think so. I think they were interested. Yeah. So I mean, although I still know I'm still working on a different project at the London Borough of Camden. My interest in the building safety case is with other potential clients.
Oh right, okay. So in terms of operants, what did you think that what bit couldn't they do?
No, it wasn't.
I think it helps everybody if we can if we kind of like take the barriers down and to talk very openly about this stuff. It's going to help everybody in their decision making, isn't it?
It wasn't that I thought there was something they couldn't do. It was the fact that they were claiming to be able to do everything when we didn't actually know what everything was.
Right.
So they were claiming to be able to provide an off-the-shelf solution to a problem which we didn't quite understand. So there was a presentation a week or so ago hosted by Ventro and Andrew Saunders from the what's it called, building safety regulator, was one of the people presenting, and he clarified that the building safety case is intentionally not very clearly specified. There isn't going to be a template, and I mean, I find this a bit baffling. I think the building safety regulator is giving themselves a huge amount of work. Yeah. But that's okay. And he was clearer about the building safety case and building safety case report than I think I mean, they really are being very, very slow at if it's going to be this massive thing, then we need to know something. We're not expecting clear templates. We're trying to produce those ourselves because it depends on what data you're collecting and what system you're using. But yeah, it was we're kind of between things. So I don't know exactly what Camden is doing now. The last thing I heard was that they were very impressed with operants. You've got your mic off.
Cutting you off, George.
Sorry, George.
No,
it was me.
Yeah, I was just about to say that I think I mean I have to declare a vested interest here because Active Plan as a software provider is also involved in this space. But if we step back from that for a minute, I think that what operants are largely doing is making sure that the documents that are needed are being stored. And I agree with you, Simon, that I think it it is an important element to things, but it actually isn't answering the question. I think it does need to be more interactive and live than that. And the other thing is that one of the things that I've discovered over this last few months of working through this is some of the key information sets, like, for example, fire stopping information or fire doors, for example. The method that the industry is currently using to do inspections has got some fundamental issues because fire stoppings, perhaps an example of that, in that if you're doing a fire stopping exercise, a fire stopping survey, you really should be looking at where the original fire stopping assets were. So in other words, rather than coming along and just doing fire stopping inspection using maybe something like bolster or field wire or plan radar, there's a whole range of really good applications that do those surveys. But the numbers that people record against them, and maybe even a barcode against them, they relate to the inspection. They don't relate to the thing that you're inspecting. So the result of that is that in maybe 2 years' time, a new inspection will come along and they will issue a reference against the asset that they've inspected or repaired. But actually, they're not recording it against the original asset. So it breaks the golden thread.
Yeah, that I think is absolutely true, George. And if asset managers are not managing their assets to the extent that every fire stopping, every piece of fire stopping work can be matched against the asset or the location, then yeah, you've broken the golden thread, and that's it's to some extent a metadata issue where metadata is about assets rather than so like barcodes or QR codes. But yeah, assets need to be managed in lockstep with fire stopping and all the other surveys.
So they think that they're complying, and it appears sort of at first glance that they are, but if you dig a little bit deeper, they're not. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah, because, well, it depends on what you call complying, but the point is, if anybody came along and said, well, fire doors are exactly the same. So if, for example, you're doing a fire door inspection, let's say, for example, the council's got maybe, 5,000 fire doors across the portfolio, and they have a fire door survey done, and they go and inspect each of those fire doors, and maybe even put a barcode or something like that on the door. Unless they've actually related it back to the original door schedule, which has got the specification on it, then what you're doing is you're creating a brand new data set that doesn't relate to what was installed.
Right. Okay.
Now, it's not easy because O&Ms often aren't very good. So that original base data may not be so great. But if they then procure another fire door survey in maybe 2 years' time, and the new fire door inspector comes along, unless they're actually relating it back to the original one, then you end up with information that's completely disconnected. So you've got no history of that. And, that I think is a fundamental issue. As Simon says, from an asset management point of view, I mean, it's so overused, this term, the single version of the truth.
Yeah.
But it's really important because that's really all of the key assets that we've been working on within BIM4HOUSING. So automatic opening vents, dampers, all of those do need to be unique assets that then you can refer things against. Otherwise, you genuinely don't have the golden thread. What we're finding to some extent is that the golden thread as a concept has been in some ways too successful, because everybody now is producing a golden thread. So
yeah, it's just they're all different.
Yeah, exactly. If we look at the work that we're doing at the moment on fire doors, this is in terms of identifying what maintenance needs to be done and what inspections need to be done. For people that don't know, we've got a work stream underway at the moment where we've got about 40 or 50 fire door experts. You're welcome to see what we've been doing. We're trying to standardize the way inspections are done so that there's a standardized methodology. But one of the key things about that is actually identifying the particular asset and then what people are doing to them, whether that be maintenance or inspections or life cycle work. And all of those different activities need to relate back to not just the individual door, but also the substrate it's in. Because the best fire door in the world is useless if the wall isn't going to protect against the fire. And if the wall has got some penetration seals in it that are damaged, then again, the best inspection of the fire door isn't going to get us anywhere. So that's certainly the lesson that we've had. And so the relationship between the spacers, the measures of protection, and also the activities, that's why what Laura's doing there, that sounds very good, because it means that you can run scenarios, especially Adelard will be looking at that from a point of view of how that's how those scenarios are done. So simply having a record of the fact you've had your doors inspected is obviously good, but it's not really answering the question, I think.
Let's hear from someone else. Anthony Atherton. Are you there?
Hi, Richard. You okay?
Hi, mate. How's it going? Where are you from? I should know that, shouldn't I?
So I'm from HOUSING in Cheshire.
So where are you on the journey?
So I think we've spoken before, Richard, offline.
Yeah.
So my role is basically part of innovation. So I look after sort of digital transformation projects. So I might not be the best to answer all the questions. Essentially, I'm part of the conversation to offer, recommendations internally as to where we're all up to on the journey. So to answer your question, I'd say around roughly 20 to 30% of our buildings over the 18 meters now have digital twins. Of them, I think we've used one as a pilot to put fire assets in. But we do have a dedicated health and safety team working on the building safety case. From what I know, they're primarily using Victoria electronic documentation. That's in a centralized location. And I think the main hurdle at the moment is around access. So one of the things I was quite interested in is what Laura was saying around her digital approach, because we've done quite a lot on golden threads in the past. So I think we will be taking a sort of digital first approach to the safety case, if that makes sense.
I remember you that was something you were very much pushing.
Mm-hmm.
I think when we spoke, you're having a little bit of resistance. Is that?
I wouldn't say resistance. I think the team are just at the moment trying to get the data before we can do anything with it, if that makes sense. Like I said, we do have a dedicated team working on it. It's a shame, obviously, none of them are here at the moment. So yeah, that's pretty much where we're up to at the moment. That's why I'm sort of keeping in the conversation of it.
Yeah, no, we've given us a good idea of exactly where you are.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of actually the data retrieval and storage, that kind of stuff, is that something you don't know about it? Is it something that's happening and that's left for another day?
Yeah, as I say, I think it's all stored electronically. I just think the main issue is making sure that the right people have access. And I mean, to be honest, we don't have too many buildings that are over the threshold anyway. But the ones that we have are the ones we're focusing on in terms of getting the fire assets in. I know we've used systems in the past like Bolster that's been mentioned, as well as a couple of other BIM ones. And I had the same concern as Victoria, really, about how we get them assets out of a digital twin for that quick access. So it was really interesting to hear what Laura was saying about that. I think that sounds the way forward.
Yeah, I had a good chat with Laura and her colleagues. God, it seems like an age ago. It's just a couple of months, a few months when the process was still in its infancy. God, quite a change now, but they were very well advanced at that time. Very well organised.
Richard, could I just contribute something to what?
Of course, yes.
Yeah. So one of the key things with BIM4HOUSING is what we're trying to do is make sure that the data that is held in the various different software applications can talk to each other, is interoperable. Yeah. One of the barriers that we've encountered is that because people are just working with a report. So if you look at Bolster, for example, people will get the Bolster report, which is a snapshot in time, but all it is a pin on the PDF. So it therefore is difficult for any other software application to actually use.
Yeah.
Now, what we've been, I've been with my other hat on. I've been talking with people like Bolster and Plan Radar and Field Wire and the various different other applications, and they're actually willing to share their information.
Good.
So it means that we're on a journey with this, but we're either using APIs or an API, for anybody that doesn't know, means that you can, one software application can talk directly to the database in another, or indeed taking the reports that are produced and just reading them as in an electronic format that can be transformed. I think that's a really good way forward, because it means that it doesn't matter what software you're using or your inspectors are using. They can use the one that's most suited to their particular needs. But as long as we can agree the protocols for how that information can be linked, then it means that a landlord can actually receive machine readable information to update their master models. And I think that's something that one of the things I would suggest is that that's a critical thing that you should be asking if you're having any work done, to make sure that the information is interoperable.
Definitely.
Okay, Mustafa, are you there?
Hello.
Hi, how you doing?
Hiya.
Where are you from, Mustafa?
Clarion Housing.
Oh, okay. So you guys are obviously early adopters.
Yes.
So so you've got all your houses registered now? Your blocks?
Not all of them, no, but we have a system that we're working with, Bentley system. We're trying to build a database that would provide the golden thread for Clarion Housing.
Excellent, excellent. So this would be, when you say a system, is that what the everybody's been talking about for the last half hour, in terms of something that somewhere to store and retrieve and order and update?
Exactly. It's kind of a blank platform where you can do whatever you want it to do, basically. So we're trying to tailor the software tools in a way that would work with our HRB stock. So
right. So you're not actually doing a bespoke system. You're adapting an existing system.
No, it's not existing. We're trying.
You're creating.
It has tools that you can build a system, a tailored system for your relevant housing association. So we found that in the market there isn't really a bespoke system that would kind of fill all the needs for our association and meet the golden thread requirements. We have around just below 80 HRBs, I think. And the system we were looking for is something that could manage that number of stock, not on kind of an individual HRB. Sure. We want to, have the data be saved there, the documents of all fire assets of all HRBs to be managed from a single system. And that we couldn't find to be something in the market that would provide that. But we collaborated with Bentley Systems, and they have tools that are used for plants, railways, reservoirs, I think, as well. It's a very intricate system with tools that would allow you to basically tailor these tools in a way that would work with your association. So they would say, for example, kind of like a blank paper with, tools that would say, okay, do you need the documents to be done in this way? Do you need the reporting to be, done in this particular way? And that's where comes, our role really in the digital build environment within Clarion is to use these tools to build our own system sort of way rather than something ready to have,
Mustafa, are you still going point clouds to models, or are you doing something more?
Yeah. So for surveying, we do laser scanning. We use a portable laser scanner. And we laser scan the buildings. We generate point clouds, and then we merge these point clouds in order to create 3D models for our stock. That is the geometrical data of our HRBs. And then we do surveys as well, in which we have identified around 65 assets that are related to structural and fire safety. And during the survey visits, we capture this data. We currently have them on Excel sheets. The way the data is captured about these assets is based on a spatial hierarchy that we developed at Clarion, which tells you, for example, a fire door belongs to, let's say, flat 5 of second floor of this block of the estate, and the code of the door, by reading it, if you're familiar with the hierarchy, you would know where the door is simply by reading the code of that door. But we are using the 3D model to support, finding these assets visually. The system that we're using with Bentley, is it has a 3D viewer in which we import in which we put the 3D model into the system, and the assets, the survey data is also put into the system, and then the 3D smart object within the 3D model, let's say of a fire door, would have the code of the door, and our survey data would have the same code of the door. Therefore, they can be linked together in the Bentley system, and documents, reports could be saved against that asset, that door.
And when you went through that with, I remember when Jack was explaining it last year. The way you were doing the 3D model in Revit.
Yeah, we're doing it in Revit. Yeah.
Okay, so you're producing a 3D model in Revit, and then you're bringing it into Bentley to manage the basically the estate.
Yeah, just an export function. But as you know, George, Revit can be, the 3D model can be in Revit format and can be in an IFC, and the IFC is interoperable, so we could use it really with any system. But we're putting it on Bentley because it's where the 3D model and the data are combined and can be managed together.
Yeah, be interesting to put it some stage. Be interesting.
George, your mic is going on and off. It's not so easy to hear.
I'm sorry. Okay.
That's all right at the moment.
Yeah, I was just going to say it would be great, Mustafa, if you'd be willing to show that to us at some stage. That would be very helpful.
At some stage, yes. Yeah.
You know the 65 assets that you've identified.
So,
in the interest of standardization, would you be willing to share what those assets are?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's you've got structural assets, for example. You've got compartmentation as well. You got just as the top of my head, because I'm the one doing the surveys really. You got suppression system assets. You got fire safety, doors, windows, assets that are related to ventilation.
Would you,
that
sorry? Yeah, sorry, apologies. The reason I'm asking, the reason I'm asking the question is that, as you know, I think we did a lot of work with HACT to come up with a list of asset types, and one of the challenges with that is that there's in those lists we got back from the various different housing associations, there's a mix of assets or asset types and systems. And also,
exactly.
And what would be helpful from my point of view is to understand whether you've, for example, if you've got an asset which is maybe, a dry riser, and how that then fits into other things. So if you wouldn't mind sharing that with us, I won't take up the time now, but if you wouldn't mind sharing that with us, we can also share with you some of the other work that we've been doing since.
Yeah, I would be happy to. It's just we're kind of still in what we call the digital construction phase of our assets, basically. We think that there is a construction phase in building a digital 3D model with the data, and there is the operation phase where the data combined with the 3D model can be managed virtually. So we are still in the construction phase, but to answer your question, I suppose partially is that the Bentley system, after many conversations, really, we realized that we do need two hierarchies. One is a spatial hierarchy that tells us the asset's location within the HRB, and another called the system hierarchy, which is not really, spatial. It mostly says this fire alarm is in this room of the building. That's the spatial hierarchy, but it is connected to this fire system of the building, which is functional hierarchy, sort of, if that makes sense.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah. So we really need both hierarchies, and they are managed on the platform separately. A system hierarchy wouldn't show, for example, an asset on the 3D model. Obviously, you can check it out and you can see its exact location. But while you see its location, it would tell you which system it belongs to. And there are systems that, for example, within the same building, There are systems that are related to residential units, and there is a system that covers the whole communal part of the building. And obviously you have, an HVAC system, you have suppression system, fire system, structural, etc. And we do have a list of systems that we have identified that are related to structural and fire safety.
Okay.
Okay, great. Scott, it'd be good to hear from you.
I've been.
All right.
Yeah. So I've been listening in with interest. I should probably declare for others on the call, I'm an architect, not from a housing association or a developer, which I think is largely the case on the call. But I've been involved with this development group for a couple of years, so it's good to be able to reconnect, and looking forward to Digital Construction Week. What's really interesting is checking in, is actually hearing what sounds like really good progress. A couple of clients, because we know our clients have been wrestling with the challenges around data capture, hosting, validation, how sophisticated or not any of the systems might be. And clearly from this call, there's progress being made, which is great to hear, and interesting to hear some practical examples and some names kicking around. I do think there's kind of two streams to be considered at the moment. There's a focus here on safety case, which we appreciate from a client perspective in terms of now obligations to gather information on existing stock. But that's going to be, I guess, the data set and how the information is organized and procured for safety case is different, I think, at least in my mind, it's different to what lies ahead October this year for Gateway 2 for new build development, and it'll be a broader package of information for that Gateway 2 submission, covering, not just safety issues, but, wider building regs pack. So it's got to be, I think, organized and kind of strategized in a slightly different way. So we're wrestling with that ourselves in terms of how we kind of organize information and collaborate with others. I think a wider piece, and I'm interested on kind of clients' perspective. This is kind of wider strategy around procurement. Both. Appreciate a focus here on kind of digital content and information, but just the wider piece, I think, is interesting how the Building Safety Act might shift procurement, earlier engagement, and then how that translates to how teams collaborate and how they collaborate efficiently and effectively in a digital, in a collaboratively supported by good digital process. Final thought, I guess, is picking up on discussions around sort of components, and validation, for instance, fire doors or specific items. I think it's interesting to kind of balance components versus, let's say, validated strategy. So, a single component like a door or a barrier may be correct in itself, but it functions as part of a wider strategy in combination with other items, and you need a whole sequence of items to be correct to provide provide safety. And at the moment, it seems to me it's difficult to kind of digitize that process. You've actually got to have a competent individual who validates either the design or the install. And how do we capture that? Because that's ultimately where we're heading, which is individuals or responsible people signing off either design or signing off as built. So there's a number of different dimensions to the discussion, which I think are quite interesting and challenging.
We've had a lot of our meetings, I'm sure you've been in them, Scott, where the compartmentation issue has come up many times. As you say, it's all right doing an inspection of a fire door, But as somebody raised earlier, if it's put in the wrong wall, it's virtually valueless. So you've got to have somebody to actually inspect the whole compartment. The problem is that the people who can, there's a danger that the people who are capable of inspecting the whole compartment don't have enough specialist knowledge in each of the individual assets that make up that compartment.
Quite, and a strategy, is compartmentation, sprinklers, signage, means of escape, ventilation, that in its how all those elements combine together within a strategy that delivers protection and safety. So we, as well as validating components, we're going to need to robustly capture understand, capture, record, validate the strategy, and then associate components to an agreed strategy. Which takes us, I think, to strategy documents, not necessarily, model information. I mean, they're both relevant, but you've got to have strategies as well as, documented strategies as well as validated components.
Yeah,
Scott,
that's interesting. Anybody, George, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I was just going to ask a question on that, Scott, because that's certainly of what's needed. But I'm sort of learning a lot on this journey. I think we all are. And the relationship between the fire strategy, for example, and how that's documented, and how that then is taken into a series of outputs that make it easy for people to understand, is a bit of a challenge, really, because what we're seeing is that fire risk assessment, for example, might refer to a document, but it's actually quite difficult for the person that's reading the fire risk assessment to actually interpret that in the context of maybe several other documents which may or may not be up to date. And therefore, to some extent, I think, for want of a better term, the digital twin, or whatever you call that, I think it's an overused term, but I think it is. That's really what we're looking at. What we're looking at, I think, is something that allows you to interact with a virtual building in some way. It might just be 2D, but to be able to identify, when you do, would you do the fire strategy, Scott, or would you have a fire engineer initiate that, and then you're responding to it? You're creating a design solution that responds to that, or are you initiating the fire strategy?
I think in the current context, and certainly considering high rise or high risk residential buildings, we would always want a fire engineer engaged. They'll ordinarily prepare a strategy document, and then effectively the design team are translating those strategy requirements into design. So for instance, for us, it'd be compartmentation. An MEP consultant might design a smoke ventilation system that achieves the protection requirements of the strategy. But I guess again, this is kind of illustrates where the new build versus kind of legacy context will differ in terms of the information set. So on a new build project, you should have the strategy and then see how the design delivers the strategy, and then how a gateway 3, the execution of the design, delivers all of the above. On our legacy projects, particularly where there isn't, it's often the case that the record information won't host a strategy. You're kind of reverse engineering it to satisfy yourself on an acceptable level of compliance. And often the case that level of compliance wouldn't actually necessarily meet, full new build standard. It's a judgment in the context of that building. So again, the information available is different, handled differently.
Victoria, can I bring you in on there?
Yeah, it was just a question for Scott really on strategies. Are predominantly the HAs doing a strategy pre-build? So something that would be submitted at Gateway 1, perhaps, and then a strategy pre-occupation.
Yes, is I guess the short answer. We, with certainly for HRBs, where we're interfacing now with Building Safety Regulator at Gateway 1, we're finding it's actually quite a deep dive. I mean, conceptually, and as I'm sure you know, the Gateway 1 as falling under planning legislation has actually got quite a narrow brief, like land use and sort of high value. But in reality, if it's going to make a difference, you really want to quite tightly define a strategy. And certainly it's the case that our interactions with HSE have really been very, very detailed, at a detailed strategy level, individual rooms, individual spaces and relationships. So we're trying to fix it, planning, certainly get principles agreed, and then ideally, develop that in a linear way. If it varies later, which it will from time to time, at least your sort of criticalities in terms of going back to negotiate or rework something.
Right, yeah, I mean, that's how I saw it. I was just checking.
Yeah.
I think some people have said to me before, if they've done the strategy at the beginning, they've updated it preoccupation. And in my mind, you can't update the strategy that was there for the, for the build that you have to put through Gateway 1. They're two completely different documents, and those that are both have to be in the safety case as far as I was concerned. So I think you've just confirmed that for me as well. So, right, thank you.
Excellent. Oh, sorry, George, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, sorry, this mirrors, Scott, and Victoria, what we've been finding in the construction group within BIM4HOUSIng, and that is that they've gone into the detail, Scott, of for example, what should the dampers, how should
yeah.
What's become very clear is that unless you get the space strategy right beginning, then you're really going to fail at Gateway 2, because it means that if the space strategy and the use of the spaces isn't nailed earlier in the process, then you could be selecting the wrong products.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely right. And that a product might appear to be correct in a model or in a database, may appear to be correct, but that's only based on certain assumptions on the strategy. So you've got to know what the strategy is. I don't know, a compartment wall in a tall building, you might assume it's 60 minutes. Just because it's a compartment wall, but maybe it should be 120 minutes because it's a wall to a transformer room, so you've got to understand the strategy.
If anybody's interested, we're actually going to be running some work with Balfour Beatty, Mace, Bouygues, and also the Ian McKilvey from the Finishers and Interior Specialists Association, and also the Smoke Control Association as well. So what we're going to try and do is look at what information do we need to know about different manufactured products, and what's the decision tree that a designer should need to go through. So this, to some extent, Scott, mirrors some of the work that you were doing a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So Paul McSolly from Mace is leading on that, but he's been doing the Association of Passive Fire, ASFP, or something like that. And they've got something that they're sharing with us, where they're actually looking at how does what information does somebody that's, for example, picking a smoke damper, what information do they need to know about the wall and the spacers and things? And it's a really complex set of decisions that are being made, but arguably those need to be recorded. in some way,
Yeah.
so that you're not just entirely dependent on maybe a procurement person.
Yeah.
Swap something.
It's also where competency comes in, because I'm familiar with work Paul's done on dampers, which is, when you see his mapping exercise laid out, it's incredible, but it's only mapping, reality and obligations as specifying. It's just seeing it laid out in a workflow. But that's also, again, where competency comes in, because the competency of the specifier is to get that right. And then there's the question is, do you have to record every micro decision on a project to demonstrate compliance? And it's that balance between, the important information and being reasonably able to rely on the competencies of the teams. Because if you capture everything, well, I don't think we can or should capture everything.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
But what I think is looking at each of those decision points in
Yeah.
that decision tree.
No, that was a really, really good exercise. And to your last question, George, we'd be very interested in connecting with that group, because there's a really interesting piece of work evolving there.
So where I'm thinking of it, Scott, is that if, for example, certain information is needed about maybe the plasterboard that is being used, then that ought to be one of the things that we ask for. We make sure that the British Gypsum actually are providing that information, so that whoever is the competent person that's making those decisions can at least be confident that they've got the information. We're not suggesting that this should be done by ChatGPT or something. It's really a matter of making sure that the right information, because the manufacturers are willing to provide the information. They just need to know what information is needed and what format it's needed in.
No, agreed.
Okay, let me, David Lindsley. You there? Making coffee. Yeah, I think he is. I'll get Malcolm Dixon. Are you around?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Malcolm.
Hi there. So I joined quite late, and I was in previous meetings, so I've just been listening at the moment.
Yeah. Sure. Go on.
I see you've got Simon.
Where are you from, Malcolm?
I'm from London Borough, Camden.
Oh, right. Okay, cool.
And we've not really been using. I see Simon's on the call here. He's been working with Camden on some of our assets. But, not Simon. I don't think you've been working on the new build things, but yeah, I'm just trying to gather procedures within Camden itself. We have rarely been using BIM on most of our buildings, although we have one which was Maitland Park. I know that I've been chatting with George about that one in the past, but that's just a little bit of background from our side.
Okay.
We've done some more.
Sorry, George, go.
I was just going to say, Malcolm, we can pick up on that. We've been doing some more work on that, just on our basis. So you might find that useful too. I'll have a catch up with you on it.
Right, okay, great, thank you.
Andrew Holly. You knew your time would come.
Hi. Yeah, I mean, we're using a consultant. We've got.
Sorry, can you just where are you from for everybody's benefit?
So yeah, I'm a building safety manager at a Tower Hamlets community housing, and we've had full remediation of a couple. Well, we've finished one and we're working on another for remediating the external walls. Pretty much took the whole wall system off and put it back on again. So that was a good starting point, because a part of that project we were using Multi Vista, to record all the work that was done. So that's a really useful thing, because that's later scans and photographs all pulling in together using CAD line, and that puts a lot of data as a starting point, and then we're using that. That's good. So we're going to do one building as a starting point, I think, based on that, and then working out, but then seeing how it works well as we scan existing buildings as well, and we'll work on. We're still working on things like, spatial hierarchy, which we've started by using it on door surveys. And while we're doing fire door surveys, we're trying to do it sort of in-house, and realise, I think, that we'll need a bespoke system of some sort, maybe plan radar or whatever, because as some of you said, it's things like when you do the second survey, how do you make sure you're updating it and it's the current one, and you're not duplicating an action on it because you notice the same dent twice, or something. So that, yes, as like most of us, as we do things, you realise what the problems are, and then you have to try and solve them. So knowing what other people are doing, things like the consultant said, our price included info of 30 assets. Now, Clarion, you're saying 65 sort of asset items, if you like, types. That's quite useful. A difference, isn't it? Useful, and equally, our consultant has said, well, some people have gone really deep and they want 200. It's sort of down to how much detail you want.
I think we identified at BIM4HOUSING, George. Was it 125 critical fire assets?
Well, I think we started with about 150, and then by the time the HACT group had finished with it, it was up at almost 300.
Oh, right.
But as I say, a lot of those.
I suppose that's 300 possibles, but in practice on each building, you probably have a lot less than that. But if you need a column because it might occur,
exactly.
Then that's it's quite a big thing, isn't it? And I did like the point actually about system function. I guess that's a bit like the difference between a wiring diagram and a plan of a building, isn't it? Your wiring diagram, your system function shows how they link together, whereas your plan of your building and your spatial hierarchy shows you where they are physically. So that's a good point, actually. I'll take that as a really good takeaway, actually. And the other thing from Simon was, for me, how well builders will have to understand maintenance. In my experience up to now, where I've worked for companies, housing associations that have commissioned a builder to build a building, their target at that point was very much, well, I've got to get the building built and I've done my bit and I'm off. And then I turn up as it nears to finish and I go, how does that work then? And they go, well, my bloke who's a fire alarm bloke says that's what's supposed to happen. And I go, that doesn't work. Or just little things like, well, that's great. You've buried it so it looks pretty behind the plasterboard, but I need to get to it now to maintain it. So I need an access hatch. And if I put an access hatch in, we're now cutting into a firewall. And it's which it shouldn't really happen. It's basic CDM, isn't it? That's day one of CDM. How do you maintain things? But yeah, that sort of thing I think is going to have to be understood. And groups like this, which are joining up new build with maintenance side of things like ourselves, it's quite important for them to understand ongoing maintenance. So much so that when we did the wall recladding, we thought about how we were going to clad, in this case, a copper clad standing seam external system, how we were going to put it in. So in 5 years' time, if a fire engineer says, actually, I really want to open up and have a look at a few fire barriers, compartmentation lines between floor and, at ceiling levels, how can we open up the copper in future? You know, that was least disruptive. You know, it's a bit like the access hatch idea. You know, how are you going to get in there, even if it's only once every 5 years, once every 10 years, just to say, yes, these things haven't deteriorated, they're still okay. Or even if there was a problem with them, could we get to them and replace them without having to rip half the side of the building off again? You know, so there's lots of things which I think are quite new and really were never on our radar in the past, because it was built and buried and you leave it.
As soon as you add one variable, it's a million times more than proportional, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the point.
Everything.
Yeah. The query I've got from people, we were thinking of for data, for servicing, this is going back to servicing. So at the moment, most of our servicing is in bespoke things or on a cloud somewhere, or, you know, a pile of certificates and then an Excel spreadsheet. So we're thinking in-house anyway, just to manage processes. We're going to use Asset Pro for, you know, an asset, when it's going to be serviced next, when it's going to be replaced yet, and cycles in that. So therefore, from our compliance items, lots of different stuff, the lifts on the lift portal and the electrical certificate somewhere else and all the rest of it. We would pull data from there and put it into Asset Pro, and then from Asset Pro we'd put it into Multi-Vista and CAD-Line, and hopefully it will all go down. But the worry I've got, it's all fine, but the worry I've got is someone renames something and suddenly all the links break, you know, and that sort of thing. Have other people got similar issues or solutions to that? Or do you take it out of wherever it is now and put it into one place where you then deal with it in there and then have to talk to your contractors about how do you do that?
One of the things we identified right at the beginning of our work was everybody labels everything differently.
Yeah.
And it's getting total consistency in the labeling, because if it's not done properly, then firstly it limits the opportunities of making it machine readable, and if things aren't machine readable, I don't know where you go. George, were you trying to speak? Sorry.
No, not at all. I'm sorry.
It's just it's where your microphone's coming in and out. If you speak when it's on a down phase, I can only just hear you, and I'm not sure if it's you.
I apologise. Sorry, I'm sitting in my car. Yeah. So all I was going to say, in terms of that question, Andrew, that's really about having proper data libraries. So what should be happening in my view, the various different applications that you're using, Asset Pro, Multi-Vista, etc. What you need is a master library that is coordinating the different elements, because you'll never be able to get all of the different systems to use the same nomenclature or same naming. Even if you dictate it, you'll find that people will call things something else. But if you've got a common data library, then you're able to then reference it. I don't know if you're familiar with the term GUIDs, but a unique identifier can then be shared with the various different applications. So I think that's certainly a way of achieving what you're trying to achieve.
Excellent. Yeah, I'll make a note of that.
Okay, we've got just about 5 minutes left. Has anybody else got any quick points to make?
I'd just like to say something on what Andrew was saying there, and this is an interesting idea, Andrew. You know, when you were saying there, to be able to ask a contractor, have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? What would be really helpful, I think, from BIM4 Housing's point of view, if you and Victoria and the other experienced people that are building safety managers, for example, if you could come up with some scenarios or some examples, like you've just said, about those questions, we could actually create a library that you could use as a check. and we could share that with the contractors so they know the questions that you're going to be asking. Do you think that would make sense? I think that would be a useful resource.
That sounds a good idea, doesn't
it? Yeah, I know what you're saying. Trying to think of real ones as well, you know, very more specific ones that are quite critical in some cases. Yeah.
It's that collaboration, isn't it, at the outset, really?
Yeah.
So I think that was the Grenfell issue, is things have been done in isolation and silos, and it's not been thought of more holistically. So I guess it's make sure the contractor doesn't do that and think in isolation when they're doing the build and thinks forward. But I guess wouldn't the gateways be there to manage some of that, because they want to see not only how it's built, how it's going to be used as well, how it'll be usable at the end, not just saying we're going to do this and do that, but how is that usable and how can you prove that sort of thing. So you would hope some of that would be mitigated at least.
Well, yeah,
and of course, and the very big thing is going to be that it means that people like some doing, you know, lots of pre-planning not being done on the hoof as they build it. It's going to have to be a much more upfront. And you know, we've spoken about that, all of us, before, but that should help. And then the guys turning up on site should be able to price things much more accurately. They should know exactly what they're doing. Not when you come on site and have a quick design and throw it in when it's too late. You know, that's the scenario we should be avoiding. Yeah, and some things. I mean, I've done a little presentation to our area group of developers in our borough, and I was saying things like, you know, the order in which things are built makes a big difference. It's no good sealing up a wall and then calling your electrician to run the cables through it and not calling back your fire stopper afterwards. You know, so the fire stopper's been and gone, then the electrician makes a hole saying, oh, the fire stopper will be back, and then he never is. That sort of thing. So, you know, are they getting the work stream done in the right order?
I
Excellent. Oh, sorry, did you have a point, George?
I was just going to say that that's a procurement thing, going back on what Scott was saying earlier, because in some cases the person that's putting in the ceiling has got a program to meet, and if they don't meet that program, they get penalties. Yeah, even though it's stupid, because they know they're going to have to take the ceiling down again because the electrician's been delayed for another reason. But I've seen this, it's crazy. I'm sorry, Richard, I'll shut up now.
Sorry, yes, I said Simon, I did mean Scott. Sorry, thank you, Scott.
Okay, guys, well, that's been very, very helpful, certainly to us going into DCW. Are any of you coming to DCW? I know Scott said he was hoping to come down. Anybody else?
It's Excel on the 18th of May. Excel in London.
I'll try and make that. It's only across the river.
Yeah, I might be able to make it as well.
I should make the effort.
Well, apparently there's a free bar on the stand all day.
I'm there.
Cool.
I've got to be one of the closest, so it would be a bit embarrassing if I didn't come, really, wouldn't it? I'll try and get that in my diary.
Excellent, excellent. Well, see you all soon, and thank you very much for that.
Thanks for arranging it. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.